It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday edition of the show. Hard to believe it's already midweek. Here we are in the middle of it, and September is winding down very, very fast. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Greatly appreciate you also if you're listening on the RealAg Radio podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Today on the show, we got lots of ground to cover. We're going to be talking markets today with Tyler Schau. He is with agmarket.net. We're going to cover spring week because I want to find out what exactly is happening on this sort of sideways trade and grind to just going lower, slowly but surely it sure feels. We'll talk to him about that, as well as the oilseeds market, canola and soybeans, because I know many of you are looking at that. I don't care if you're in Canada or U.S., we want these oilseeds to come through from a profitability standpoint, and there definitely are some concerns on the world stage when it comes to demand. We're also today going to be unveiling some audio from a new podcast that we're launching at RealAgriculture.com. It's called the Farm Safety Roundup. It is sponsored by Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. And today on the show, we're going to be joined by one of the people from WSPS, and that is Fred Young will be with us here today on the program. We're going to talk about farm safety from the aspect of infield and on the highway or those side roads as you're transporting equipment. There are things to consider to make sure that we are being safe when out and about. We'll also have time today for a short Real Ag, top ag news stories of the day as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Of course, we're across all different social media platforms. You can also call us at 855-776-6147. Another tough one for the Blue Jays last night. I really hope you are better at closing out your harvest. You got to be better at closing out harvest than the Blue Jays right now or in the back end of that bullpen. Jordan Romano is struggling. Another game last night where he's taken the loss. That's 2 in a week, I believe. So, yeah, not good. They're still good. They're still in a very good position, though, right? So with how the standings are looking, they look to be in a playoff spot. I guess a bit of a question on who they're going to play, but they need to take this into their own hands here and close this out and qualify and move on and get that rotation organized. The longer it takes them to organize, to make that move where they get that X beside their name where they've qualified, the less likely they are to organize the starters to who they want to start in the wild card series, which is a best of 3 that starts on Tuesday. So definitely following the baseball. I know you are too while you're ripping through the fields on your combine. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get to Tyler Schau. We're talking markets. He is with agmarket.net based out of North Dakota, and he's coming up next. It's now time for a product spotlight with the Canadian Canola Growers Association. We're joined right now by Dave Gallant. Dave, for anyone who is unfamiliar with the cash advance from CCGA, give us a bit of a brief overview on the program and how it really works to help farmers.
It gives them access to cash flow for their inventory before they have to sell that inventory. There's no fee, and farmers have access to $350,000 interest-free and another $650,000 at prime minus 0.75% on over 55 different products. So it really assists farmers with their working capital needs, especially now in the fall. And lastly, farmers only have to pay a cash advance as they sell the product, so there's no monthly or quarterly payments required, which means they only pay when they have cash flow from a sale. Farmers can apply right now. If they are not an existing customer, they simply call us at 1-866-745-2256.
Looking for robust, reliable grain storage solutions? AGI leads the industry in quality, innovation, and offerings to protect your investment. Designed for exceptional cleanout, superior strength, and unbeatable versatility, you can rest easy knowing your grain is secure in an AGI West Steel bin. With 100 years of manufacturing experience, AGI West Steel bins will exceed your expectations for reliable storage. AGI West Steel. Long-term safe storage. Find AGI at your local dealer.
It's time to talk markets here on RealAg Radio. Imitator stabilizer products claim dual protection, but do they actually deliver? Defend your UAN from nitrogen loss with Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services, offering superior above and below ground protection. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. Let's get to the markets. We're talking to Tyler Schau. He's market analyst with agmarket.net based out of North Dakota. Tyler, welcome back to the show.
Doing really good. Good to be back with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We ran into each other at Commodity Classic, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Down in Orlando.
Nice. Oh, man. Right there next to Disney World. Okay, yep. Let's talk about the markets. Let's start at 100,000 feet. We've kind of got this market, like I got a spring wheat chart up right now for December, and I'm kind of looking at it, and a lot of the other charts look the same, where we're kind of just sort of grinding to the side, and one would even say grinding kind of lower. What is your take here as you look at all these different commodity complexes?
You're right. It's been a slow grind lower since that last weather scare that we had in mid to late July. A lot of analysts, a lot of folks have been calling for some type of a bottom here in the wheat market, especially for the last month to 2 months, really. If you look at that December chart, the month of September has just kind of been a flat month. We see a little bit of a pop up. We see some sell off. We're kind of really stuck in that 760 to 790 range. The farmer's not going to like the answer I give here. There's not a lot of news stories out there that could spark the bullish movement that they want to see, right? Like farmers want to get back to that. Boy, what I would give to be able to sell $9 wheat again. Yeah. The war story seems worn out and tired. The one that was in our back pocket for a large part of the summer was the drought that you guys had in Canada. Yep. One of the things I've been reading is, yes, your production is down, but quality was very high. A lot of high protein wheat that got produced in Canada this year. A lot of farmers, one of the baffling things for me, and this is one of the reasons it's hard for me to get real bullish any commodities right now, but all summer I listened to farmers and agronomists both, and especially in the northern tier of North Dakota, and eastern half or eastern third, I would say, tell me just how bad the wheat crop was going to be, and yields were going to be terrible. And they were telling us something, 40 to 50% of average production, which, in a lot of those areas is 70 to 80 bushel wheat on average. So we were penciling that into our spreadsheets and thinking, yeah, there's going to be a real story here. And then all of a sudden harvest comes along and they're average or better. I hear a lot of stories in some of those areas that were telling us their crop was terrible that grew 80 to 90 bushel wheat.
Oh, wow.
And so, that's one of the stories that if you pay attention to basis levels in North Dakota, they just got hammered in the last month and a half. They're not popping up yet. I know a lot of producers are now storing grain, waiting for that price, telling me it's got to come back. And I think we'll see a little bit of a pop, but I'm trying to gear my producers up to be ready to sell on rallies, in that 8 to 830 range, just because I don't know what's going to push us higher right now.
Yeah. I've been talking on RealAg Radio the past week where anecdotally, it seems I've been hearing a lot from the audience is that yields are either at or above where they thought they would be across a lot of the commodities, especially in the cereals. Now, if we have a little bit maybe better supply, if I could put it that way, than maybe we thought coming into harvest on some of these crops like spring wheat, what's the demand equation? Like what does demand look like? Because heading into the summer, all I heard about was China is a disaster and demand's not going to be strong for things like corn and soybeans. How is demand shaping up right now on the global stage?
Demand doesn't look overly promising. And I'm going to kind of, some of that is actual demand. You know, you're right. We were looking for China to come in and be this huge buyer of commodities. They are buying commodities. We know they are. They're just sourcing it from other countries right now. The second thing you've got is just large production areas around the world. You know, Russia produced a huge crop. They're so much cheaper than U.S. and Canadian wheat right now. They might not have the quality. So, I mean, there's always going to be that, U.S. and Canada is going to be where the world comes to get their quality or their high protein values. But, you know, the world buyer, I promise you the world buyer, 2 years of paying $8, $9, $10 wheat has figured out a way to substitute around some of that here. You give the buyer long enough, they're going to figure out a way to substitute and make do with what they can get their hands on. So I think there's some of that going on, but I just think supply in other areas, like I said, Russia, Brazil, you know, the story in Ukraine was there for a long time as to whether or not they've been able to ship it. Clearly, they've been figuring out how to get that product out of the country and into other locations. So I think it's a twofold story. You're right. Demand is kind of poor, but it's also just the supply out of other areas of this world that's just pushing us down. And then the last thing I got to say is it's really hard to see in the U.S. anyhow, to see a substantial export business when we've got the dollar over 106 on the dollar index. One of the things that we look at for world economic growth is the metals, and metals have just been, they have their little pops up, but for the most part in a downward trend for quite some time. And really in the last few weeks, big sell off there. So, I'm not, overly excited about world demand right now. And so it really is going to come down to what does supply do? And do we have some supply shortages that pop up around the globe?
Yeah, maybe there, fingers crossed there's something out there that does surprise us. Now that shouldn't necessarily be our marketing plan, hoping that happens. But, and so if I expand out the duration of say the spring wheat chart on December, it makes me sort of like, I look at the last year, we're really going to new lows. But if you expand it out in say 5 years, we're a good $2.50 higher than some of those lows. How should I be looking at this? Is this a drift to a 5 handle, or is there can we stay in the 7s? I'm just sort of curious how you're a little bit bearish and cautious. A bit of a test here. How much so?
It's enough to where I'm trying to get some guys to look at even pricing some of next year's crop. The September 24 contract is still hovering around that $8 range. About $7.94 was the settlement yesterday. There hasn't been anything traded on it today. You hit the nail on the head, and I've been talking to producers about this. Even at today's price, you can say, "Oh, it's terrible," and when you look at the last 2 years, today's price is not an attractive price. And I'll be right honest with you, today's price with last spring's inputs doesn't pencil out all that well. The saving grace, at least in North Dakota, is going to be the high yields. A lot of growers outperformed APH by a good 10, 20, 25%. And that's what's going to hold this together for them this year. But you are correct. When you take that 30,000 foot view, 2015, 16, 18, 19, 20, we'd have been doing jumping jacks at the opportunity to sell $7 wheat. So, don't, sometimes I'm an old cowboy. So I use the saying, don't look the gift horse in the mouth too long, because, it might not be all that great right here, but there's room to push. I don't know how realistic $5 is right at this moment, given the fact that from major exporting countries, our ending stocks are predicted to be at 14-year lows. So there's some problems. you've got a problem with the Australian crop. You've got some stuff going on in India. You got quality concerns around the globe. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there's absolutely no reason to stay here or go higher, but I'm not just superly ambitious. And like I said, I'm going to be jumping all over any opportunity.
That's fair. One of the things that I have really found kind of confusing and cloudy is trying to get my head wrapped around exports out of the Black Sea region. The grain deal on, grain deal off. How can we ever expect Ukrainian grain to get out of the port? Will it be going through places like Poland? It's been very, very confusing to really know what will the supply be out of the region. It just feels like it's been ultimately throughout this war, it's been higher than many people actually thought it would be.
One of the guys that I work with, he's been in the grain trade business for many, many years. And one of his comments the other day on this was, I don't know why we're surprised at Ukraine's ability to get grain moved. The grain industry is the most capitalistic industry there is on the planet. And that's just, that's economics 101. I taught micro and macroeconomics at a college for a lot of years. We'll just leave it at that. And he's correct. That the goal of a marketplace is to figure out how to get a product from where it's at to where it's needed. And yeah, there was some roadblocks, issues with ocean transport. They figured out a workaround. They figured out how to push it via rail. They're figuring out how to move it on the water again now, so even without the export deal, they're going to find ways. The market did its job. It pushed higher there, in the spring of 22, to try to encourage that movement of grain. And I think, like I said, traders, farmers, analysts have been, wanting to, how do we get ahead of any possible disruption in the Black Sea? But like I said, I think the market now has just finally got tired of that whole narrative and realized the grain's going to move. Now I say that, and if something really large escalates, now you've probably got a story. But there again, that's hanging your hat on hope, and marketing plans don't work well on hope.
But be ready though, right?
Yes.
So that something like that breaks. That's there's a pop. That's an opportunity to take care of some business, not necessarily keep your hands in your pockets.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. And one of the things that I'll talk to a lot with former students, with current customers, on marketing plans is to have a plan, but be ready to make the adjustment to that plan. Because, contrary to popular belief, Chicago and Minneapolis don't call me before the markets move. And I'm not sitting with a crystal ball in my office. We can't predict all those things. So your plan's got to be there. It's got to be flexible. But as you said, when you get those opportunities, you got to take advantage of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking here today to Tyler Schau of agmarket.net. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about canola and soybeans and see if they're a bit of a better story in comparison to spring wheat.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
Introducing the all-new Xerion 12 Series tractor by Kloss. Redesigned from the ground up to redefine the high-capacity four-wheel drive market. With 653 max horsepower, industry-leading hydraulic flow, a silky smooth CVT, a powerful TerraTrack undercarriage, and a quiet, comfortable cab with 20% more legroom. More than just power. The all-new Xerion by Kloss.
Co-op Grow team stays up to date with the latest research and technology to help support your entire operation. Talk to our team for advice tailored to your farm's needs. Co-op, here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm. We're talking to Tyler Schau from agmarket.net based out of North Dakota. Now, Tyler, let's move over to the oil seeds. That's wheat. Okay, so tell me there's a better picture here for oil seeds like canola and soybeans, please.
So there should be, same story. The canola market held up really well this summer. There's a lot of talk about the crush plants and the soybean oil market that's building here in the U.S. Canola definitely feeds into that as a seed stock. I think a lot of what you're seeing in the canola, this meltdown here over the last month, has really just been the production rolling off the fields in Canada and North Dakota. North Dakota areas, I always have to be careful. There were some areas that had really, really good canola production. There were some areas that struggled just a little bit, and canola production doesn't look quite as good here. But for the most part, you've seen a fairly decent production of canola. It is going to be, I was just looking at Ag Canada numbers. They've got their ending stocks coming in about 2/3 of what they were last year. So a pretty significant decline in production out of Canada. But there's still been some selling pressures coming in there. Soybean oil has just been under fire, really for the last week especially, but for the last month it struggled to hold up there. I think you got to go back to the world economic issues and where that world demand is for oil seeds, and that's just been weighing heavy on this market right now.
Yeah, we wait patiently for potentially the demand spark that renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel has been promising us, but that's not going to help us in fall of 23 or 24, it seems.
No, it's not. And we've had this discussion, some of the things you've got going on, especially in that soybean oil market. Yes, there is this coming supply, right? Or coming demand from all these renewable plants that are going to come online. But, like anything, they're slow to materialize. The second problem you've got is a lot of the existing crush facilities in the U.S. are older. And the harder you push them, the more maintenance is going to be required, and there's going to be more downtime. And so, the crush margins have been really good, which leads them to be crushing as heavy as they can, as quick as they can. But when you're running at max capacity that long, you're going to have breakdowns. You're going to have to slow down at some point for some maintenance issues. And that's been somewhat of a struggle. And I think, every week you look at the NOPA comes out with the crush report, and it seems here lately that what analysts expect, the estimates come in a lot higher than what the actual crush report reads. And I think that's just a function of our current capacity is at max and is currently being strained, and as a result, we're not able to crush as much as people think we would.
Yeah, and and as I think ahead, before I go ahead, I expect that what we're going to see in Western Canada, there's one thing estimating yield of wheat and of corn and soybeans. You're never going to be 100% accurate, but they're a lot easier, I guess, to get a handle around what you think they're going to be. Canola is tough. Really tough. And as I talk to farmers across Western Canada, there's so much variability, not just mile to mile, but in one field. Maybe one of those opportunities that develops from a marketing standpoint is some surprises on revisions when it does come to the yield number or to ending stocks and things like that. That's something for people to keep their head up on.
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those numbers change, and you hit the nail on the head. That's, the biggest struggle North Dakota farmers have in marketing canola ahead of the game is that sometimes they think they're going to have a monster crop, and it turns out to be a dud, and sometimes it's the exact opposite. And then lastly, the white combine can roll through at any moment and take what seems to be a great crop of canola and completely wipe it out. So I know that's one of the battles we deal with helping our producers out is just, getting a good handle on what there is and then being comfortable forward selling it.
What's your guys' intelligence say on the predictions on the soybean yield?
We're still in that 50 bushel an acre range. I'll be right honest with you. For as much talk as there has been in the market about how poor the yields are going to be, the yield reports we get and our network between Ag Market and John Stewart and Associates is pretty wide, all across the Corn Belt and up into the Dakotas, down into Kentucky. The reports we're getting better than expected. I mean, it very far more better than expected and average to above average crop yield reports than the opposite, than worse than expected or below average. So it hasn't given us any reason to come in and push that number on soybeans below 50. So we're kind of sticking with where the USDA came out with in the last report. Who knows if we'll get one next month.
Yeah, right. With the shutdown, we were talking to Jim Wiesmeyer from Pro Farmer about that yesterday. Now, on the corn though, is that a different story? We've seen a lot of hot, dry weather in parts of, you look at a state like Iowa. I have seen a lot of pictures on Twitter, and Twitter's not a real place. Mm-hmm. But is there more reason to be concerned there? Could low 70s on the 170, or do you think we're going to surprise there too to the upside?
I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of a surprise to the upside. I know that's not a popular opinion. I'm not ready. We're going to stay in that camp of that 173 to 175 range, somewhere in there. Again, most of the yield reports we're seeing rolling in are pretty strong in areas. A lot of them are coming out of Illinois right now. That was the area I really felt. That was the story there in June, right? It was how terrible that crop was. It was so dry. No way they could reproduce what they did last year. Last year that corn yield by the USDA was really held up by Illinois. The wet was bad. We know that. Western Corn Belt, Nebraska, Kansas, terrible crops, to be right honest with you. But it was picked up by Illinois, and I think they had a 210 state average last year. And so that was kind of the thought process through the summer was, Illinois was going to be well below last year's 210 number. I'm not going to, who knows where it'll come out, but I can tell you the numbers we're getting in right now through the state of Illinois are pretty decent. They're not as bad as we probably need them to be to really pull that national yield down. So I'm not looking for huge reductions. I will say as a caveat there that a lot of that's early planted, early maturing corn that missed, that was mature before that last heat wave came through in late August, early September. So
no doubt that's an important point. Thanks for making that distinction. This is harvest time. This is where the numbers all start to come in, and we're going to need, based on what I'm hearing, we're going to need some sort of shift in the demand equation here to deal with some of the supply based on some of these balance sheets that people have written. A lot of focus on demand, I think, here as we move into the winter months.
Yeah. We've got to find somewhere to go with it. We know we're going to have fewer cattle to feed, not looking for the hog number to grow significantly. So, it's going to have to get on a boat and go somewhere. Ethanol is profitable right now. They're pushing hard as well. But you can't just build an ethanol plant overnight. So, we've got to find a market for it somewhere.
Yeah, in both Canada and the U.S., you think about the spring wheat as an example where we started. There's going to be those, the two countries going head to head trying to get to get into some of these markets to deal with some of the supply. So, hey, Tyler, thank you so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate it. Great work over there at agmarket.net, and look forward to our next chat.
You bet. Take care, Shaun.
Hopefully, as we see central banks maybe start to do more pausing than raising when it comes to interest rates, we can really cook up some demand for some of these commodities, and some of these economies can get rolling on the global stage, which is going to spark commodity buying. It's watch those USDA weekly export reports, things like that. Of course, in Canada we don't have that, but the Grain Commission does have some reports. That's the thing it seems to follow here is what is world demand going to be like as we start to get a bit of a clearer picture on the supply that is out there across Canada and the U.S. across all these different commodities. Okay, we got to take a break. We'll be back with more here on RealAg Radio right after this.
Dedication, Watching the sunset over your crop is one of life's simple pleasures. The anticipation of it all. We know that feeling. Introducing our new Airflex NXT, our best honeybee header yet with the closest cut ever. Light, fast reacting, and infinitely adjustable. More yield, less time and work. Airflex NXT focuses on the future. What drives your next? Visit honeybee.ca or contact your nearest honeybee dealer.
The Advancing Women Conference, the National Leadership Conference for Women in Ag, is celebrating 10 years of bringing women in ag together. Whether you're a producer, student, entrepreneur, representative of grower association, or corporate agribusiness, invest in yourself in Niagara Falls on November 19th, 20th, and 21st. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. We're now going to dive into a very, very important topic. All throughout the growing season, especially at harvest, we need to keep our eye and our minds not only on the crops that we're growing, but also on farm safety. I know you might be given a little bit of the eye roll. This is important stuff, and you absolutely know it. And here's the other thing. When we're thinking about farm safety, and as it applies to transport, there's obviously in-field safety that is absolutely critical, but there's also on-road safety as well that we need to be considering. So I'm really excited about this new series that we are launching at RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. It's called the Farm Safety Roundup. And our partner is Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. And I'm really happy and glad to bring in our first guest in this new series that we're really excited about. It is Fred Young. He is Agricultural Health and Safety Consultant with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. Hey, Fred, how's it going?
Fantastic. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about health and safety in ag.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very important topic. It encompasses a lot of different areas. And we've made a lot of improvements in the industry when it comes to safety, but we obviously got more room to grow as well. Now, let's start with on-road safety. Now, obviously, I don't think there's many farms in Canada where you never have to get on some sort of a road to transport equipment from field to field. And a lot of times I see people complaining about, wow, these drivers don't know how to drive around equipment. And hey, there may be some truth in that, and there probably is in many examples, but we also can take accountability too, right? We play a role in making sure when we are transporting equipment, we're driving that combine down that, maybe it's a highway or a rural road, we are doing things that make that safe as well. So do you have some tips or things you want to run through to try to help people out here?
Well, I think the first thing is when we look at the equipment, what's the condition of it? And how big is it? Do the lights work on it? Do you have the right reflectors? Is there any terrain issues? Do you have any bridges nearby? Is there guardrails? Because even if we take the combine head off, that's still a big piece of equipment. You're still crossing the center line. So that idea of, yes, I still have the right to be on the road, I still have to take some sensible precautions so that I don't create any conditions that make it hazardous for both me and the operator, or me and the motorist.
Are there things that we should be making sure we do to warn people that are driving towards us, behind us, that, hey, we're here? Because, I remember I personally drove up one time on a swather and there was no flashing lights or warning lights. It was like just at nightfall. And it was a pretty close call. I actually know a family where somebody died because they had driven into a piece of machinery on the road like this. So talk about that.
Right. So certainly when we're traveling on the road at any time, most farmers today will have that beacon. They will have the four-way flashers on. Some will even have magnet flashers so they can stick it on the back of the grain wagon. So it doesn't, whether I'm daytime or nighttime, I'm doing as much as I possibly can to make myself visible. That tends to be the key thing. I've even seen where farmers have put up an old forage wagon in the field with a big SMV sign on. They painted a 12-foot SMV sign on the side of that old forage box to try to warn the public there's farm vehicles moving in the area. And certainly some of the municipalities have done that as well. They'll put up placards that this is a farm vehicle area or farming activity is active here. Those things help. To me, the key things is the condition of the equipment. What's the braking system like? What are the wheels like? Do you have the correct hitching set up? What are the safety chains like? Because that's really what enables that farmer to travel safely along the highway. And that has a lot of influence on the care, or I should say the control of the safety related issues on the road.
Yeah. And you stay alert for like soft shoulders like that can be a real dangerous situation. I think you mentioned the bridges and things like overhead wires. Those are things really just you're like want to avoid running into that being the problem.
Well, some of the farmers run into this kind of a challenge where cars are behind them. They expect them to move out of the way, and the farmer has every right to be on the road. They're not legally required to move off the road. And you mentioned the soft shoulders. Springtime, fall, was it just regraded?
Yeah. To
suggest the farmer's going to know that it's safe to pull over, they can't know that unless they've been on that shoulder before, that day, that kind of thing. So what we really try to encourage is if you can pick a non-busy time, like not on a long weekend, if you can avoid it, then use that where you can. And with the understanding is, if you see farm vehicles on the road on a long weekend, there's one reason why they're doing that. They don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. Because they don't go on the highway just for fun. They're on the highway because they need to be there. They need to be moving equipment or taking their crop off or whatever the purpose is for them being there. So they try to spend the least amount of time as possible on the road because they understand those risks. And I'll give you a perfect example. Just on Wednesday, I got a report of a road fatality where a farmer was traveling down the road and something mechanically failed on his tractor, and his tractor ended up in the ditch and he lost his life. And this is what you have to appreciate. Farmers face that every time they go on the road. Even when you check things, there's always those things that can happen that you can't anticipate, where that tractor stops and it's a major intersection. Well, now they have to get that equipment out of that intersection because it creates that vehicle scenario. So it does become very problematic when, they do put a lot of effort into that to try to prevent it. But those kind of things still do happen.
Fred, when we think about in-field, when it comes to equipment, I would like to get your thoughts on having like that morning safety tailgate meeting or having a safety plan, an emergency response plan. How do those things fit into, helping yourself deal with challenges as they do come up?
Well, I think most farms today, whether they're in the field in the spring or whether they're in the field during harvest time, if there's an emergency, it could be a combine fire, it could be a baler fire, it could be somebody's got caught in the nodder on the baler, and now we have to get the emergency response to the field where you are. There is a project called the Emily Project where it's identifying every farm field with a number. And the best example I can give you is at home when we were calling for the ambulance was going down the side road and my brother's looking out the window and he's on the phone. He's going, turn around, you're going the wrong way. And that's when we didn't have those numbers. So it's so important that if anybody across the country doesn't have that specific method to identify what farm they're in, that's something that I would approach the municipality and go, look, we need to set up a system that's going to work. The Emily Project is a very effective way to do that.
There's a couple other variables here that do contribute to safety not being at adequate levels, and we have to manage it. One, your harvest is long hours, your own fatigue. And the second one is your own stress level. So talk about how those factor into farm safety in this context.
So certainly when we look at farmers that are in the process, again, of doing all the stuff they do in a day, and again, whether it's planting, whether it's fixing equipment, whether it's harvests, trucking, these are all the things they have to manage all in a day. And 16-hour days are normal. And a lot of people don't appreciate that. And certainly during those extremely busy times, the days are even longer than that. Some farmers have the ability to get their brother, their cousin, their nephew, their niece to help, but not every farmer does. And that idea of understanding how your own system works and go, no, what I need to do is when I'm unloading that wagon, I'm going to take a micro break. I'm going to sleep. And even if it is for a few minutes, it's getting that energy back. And to me, that's the biggest thing, because the last thing you would want is to be on the road and fall asleep. For yourself, for the other motorists that are on the road, from the business side of damaged equipment, understanding how your system works. And yes, farmers can work many hours and not fall asleep, but when you push the envelope too much, then tragedy happens. So getting out of the tractor, walking around, you can still check the tractor or check the equipment to give yourself a bit of that movement break. It's a bit of a micro break for sitting for a long period of time as well. It makes you a little more alert. Those are some things that can be done. Just like eating appropriately, that helps keep your energy up. And those are just some simple things to consider as right now, certainly working on harvest and getting into the thick of it. Those are things to be mindful of related to the fatigue part.
Yep. Oh, and what about roll switches? So what I know a farm that does this, where for certain periods of the day where it's like, they're the combine operator, we're kind of getting to that afternoon lull, right, where you're kind of feeling the fatigue. It's like, I'm going to drive truck for a couple hours, you drive the combine, and you kind of just a different role, and that switch sort of is a bit of a wake up as well.
Well, absolutely. And really it's just managing the workload, right? So whether you're a cash crop operation or whether you're a dairy operation, whatever commodity you're in, that ability to, okay, who's going to do what today? And if I need help to switch up, then that's understood. And the other part to that is just when you think about where people are, how long they're going to be there, when your kind of internal radar goes off, where's dad, where's mom, because I should be able to see them in the field. I should see the tractor moving and it's not, right, or the combine. And those are just things to consider. And most farmers already do that, but it's just a constructive reminder on that. And here's the thing we have to appreciate. When you have 2 hours of sleep, it's equal to being impaired. So the idea that the farmer with 2 hours of sleep is now getting out of the combine because there's a problem with a belt or there's a problem with some kind of control module, and now for them to remember every single thing we want them to remember so that they don't get hurt, that's very, very difficult. And it's just reminding yourself that, okay, I always, if I'm going underneath that combine head, the hydraulics are locked out. If I'm underneath that haybine, hydraulics are locked out. And here's another example. Probably a month ago, long story short, fella driving down the road with a wing cultivator with a set of duals. He takes a hard left. When he takes a hard left into the side road, the cultivator, the right-hand wing swings out. He rolls the cultivator, and I've never seen a tractor get so close to rolling over. And this was a set of duals. Like the duals were 4 feet in the air. I couldn't believe he didn't roll the tractor. He rolled the cultivator, but again, if he had put the transport lock in place, that wouldn't have swung out. And he should have been going a little slower when he made the turn. But that's what I mean. It's when the push is on, those little things that you think, no, that'll be fine. I'm just going down the road a little ways. And that's when the operator gets into trouble.
Want to mention that health and safety doesn't have to be complicated at all. Fred's had some great advice here for us all to consider. And honestly, there's information that is free and easy to use. Health and safety tools and resources are available through Workplace Safety and Prevention Services in your browser, whether you're using Chrome or Safari. Just simply type WSPS, Agriculture, Health and Safety Center. We've been talking here today on the Farm Safety Roundup with Fred Young of Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. Hey, Fred, thanks so much for joining us. Great information, great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to support agriculture.
Absolutely. And support agriculture and do it safely, I should add to that as well. We'll be right back with RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM right after this.
At Brett Young, we focus on what's real. It's how we became Canada's largest independent seed company. That's why we're asking a real farmer, what do you think of BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola
What's that?
BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid with Pod Defender shatter reduction technology and Defender-rated club root and blackleg resistance.
Good yield, yeah. Probably choose it again.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to your Brett Young retailer today to see for yourself. Brett Young, distinct by design.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
It's now time for the top ag news stories of the day. Nothing beats genuine. Your equipment is no different. New Holland Genuine Lubricants are the only lubricants engineered, tested, and proven for New Holland equipment. When your performance is at stake, always keep it genuine. Visit your New Holland dealer to learn more. Let's jump into the top ag news stories of the day. Up first, story in the Globe and Mail talking about the Canadian dollar. Of course, this has a big impact on some of the values of the commodities that we are exporting out of this country. We heard a bit about this from Tyler Schau as he was talking about that strength of the U.S. dollar and how that is not helping the U.S. in terms of being competitive on the global market. Well, from a Canadian perspective, the Globe and Mail says the Canadian dollar weakened on an 8-day low against its U.S. counterpart on Tuesday as a downturn in investor sentiment offset preliminary domestic data for August showing gains for wholesale trade and factory sales. The loonie was trading 0.5% lower at $135.18 to the greenback or 73.98 U.S. cents. I personally prefer the 73.98 U.S. per U.S. cent kind of thing, after touching its weakest level since September 18th at 135.28. Quote here from Michael Goshko, who is senior market analyst at Kenerva Canada ULC. The Canadian dollar was not going to be able to swim against the tide of a stronger U.S. dollar for very long. You are talking about a dollar that's been super strong now for almost 2 months, plus you have risk appetite rolling over. So something to very much follow in the weeks and months ahead as crop marketing season really gets underway. Obviously impacting the livestock markets as well. Canada's transport minister says Bunge's $8.1 billion deal to acquire Viterra will face additional scrutiny to ensure fair competition at Canadian ports. In addition to the ongoing review by Canada's Competition Bureau, Transport Minister Pablo Rodriguez announced the proposed acquisition will be subject to an public interest assessment under the Federal Transportation Act, according to a story we have posted at RealAgriculture.com. Transport Canada has a deadline of June 2nd, 2024, or 250 days to complete this review. Rodriguez was quoted as saying, given this transaction is of significant national interest in Canada's transportation sector and the broader supply chain, it will be reviewed under the mergers and acquisitions provisions of the Canada Transportation Act. goods must continue to move smoothly, and our supply chain must continue to grow stronger. So that's definitely something to follow here as it faces a little bit more increased scrutiny. We talked about the RealAgri studies survey that we did asking farmers about this, and I think it was 70% of farmers were against the merger going forward. I still maintain, I've repeated myself several times, when you talk to people in the grain sector, they will tell you there is not as much, there is overlap in certain areas. It is not prolific across the West, and people see after this process is followed that this deal will be approved, and there will be some assets that may have to be shed because of the overlap. But there is an expectation in the grain sector, even as I talk to some competitors, saying that this will probably go through and won't face that big of a challenge. We'll see. We're following it closely for sure. Egg farmers in Manitoba have pledged $75,000 over 3 years to support agriculture in the classroom in Manitoba and its mission of agricultural education. The multi-year funding will go toward expanding ag education programs in Manitoba and sending more learning resources to educators so K-12 students can understand where their food comes from and who produces it. And of course, a big offshoot as well of Ag in the Classroom, whether it's Ag in the Classroom Manitoba or any of the other provincial groups, is exposing not just where their food comes from, but exposing that agriculture is a super interesting place. It's where the cool kids hang out, and there's lots of opportunities for you to develop a career in this industry. Now, that whether you think that's at the primary level or it's all the way through the different tentacles of the industry and research and science, we're a cool spot to be. So that's another offshoot, of course, of that program. U.S. lawmakers to consider legislation aimed at guaranteeing farmers' right to repair. This is, when I bring up right to repair, it's definitely a popular topic amongst farmers in the U.S. and, of course, in Canada as well. So Washington Democrat Representative Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez introduced the Agricultural Right to Repair Act in the House last week. The bill closely mirrors legislation put forward by Montana Democrat Senator John Tester in the Senate last year. The U.S. National Farmers Union welcomed the bill, saying it could save American farmers an estimated $4.2 billion per year in direct costs and equipment downtime. Whoa, $4.2 billion. That's a big number. I was talking to Jim Wiesmeyer, a pro farmer. We've got a podcast going up, Jim and I talking about Canada and U.S. political issues. I brought this topic up with Jim. He mentioned that right to repair is very popular topic of discussion in populist circles on both sides of the party. And now the question, though, is does it find momentum? And that's the part that everyone's kind of watching. It's really difficult to find common ground in Washington right now when it comes to any issue. Now, the American Farm Bureau has not commented on the proposed legislation. The AFBF has reached right to repair memorandums of understanding with several major manufacturers like John Deere and New Holland and AGCO, Fendt, Kubota over the past 10 months. However, the terms of the agreements prevent the Farm Bureau from lobbying for legislation that goes beyond the terms of the MOU. So that is an interesting point as well. Lots happening in the world of agriculture. We'll love your feedback on any of it. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. Make sure when you stop at YouTube, you hit subscribe and become a subscriber to us on YouTube. You can also get our daily newsletters that come out by going to realagriculture.com/subscribe. You can also provide some feedback by calling the RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. Tomorrow on the show, of course, it'll be the Farmer Rapid Fire. We'll travel across the country talking to farmers, find out how they're making out with harvest, and get some input on all of that, and find out what some of their fall plans are as well. Thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.